Have you checked the children?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
And Jaime Fuego here.
And we are here recording at 11:07 p.m. Arizona time to record our thoughts on the brand new movie release that is a sequel to a movie that actually was a little more entertaining than any of us anticipated when we originally saw it. Guys, we're here to talk about Escape Room Tournament of Champions, which, by the way, when that title is revealed in the movie, tell me you didn't have the Homer Simpson thing where he's like, woohoo, he said it, you know, like it's one of those like they said the title thing. But nonetheless, this is Escape Room 2, the sequel to, I believe, the 2018 movie, right?
Been that long? Yeah, I think it has been, man. Yeah. So
it might have been 2019, but nonetheless, is this one that was delayed by the pandemic or not so much?
It was indeed, yeah. So it was supposed to come out in, it was supposed to come out last year, and then they delayed it to January of this year, and then they delayed it even further. So, yes.
So, yes, the original would have had to have been 2018 then. Yeah, because they wouldn't have
yeah.
done it the very next year. So, all right. So, yes, Escape Room, which, just as a brief reminder, we quite enjoyed here on the channel. We thought it was PG-13 fun. It was actually a little more in-depth as far as production design goes. But, yes, this movie picks up exactly where the first Escape Room left off. Pretty much. I mean, a little bit of time later, but pretty much exactly where the last one left off. With spoilers for the first Escape Room, Zoe and Ben, was it?
Perhaps, sure.
I think it might have been Ben, but yeah, Zoe and the male that survived the first movie that vowed to track down this company that's setting up all of these games and shut them down for good. And this sort of picks up with them trying to figure out how they're going to get to New York to shut down the complex that they discover at the end of the very first movie. Of course, they get embroiled in a new series of escape rooms with a group of survivors from previous games. So that is the setup for this movie. We'll get more in depth as we go along, but for overall thoughts, I gotta say, I had a good time with this movie. I think if you enjoyed the first movie, you're gonna enjoy most of this movie. This movie did feel more derivative. There were less set pieces, it felt like, and I guess a little more of the same, so less uniqueness that the first one had, I guess. But it was still an enjoyable movie that was thrilling, and I gotta give props for the fact that this is a PG-13 movie, and they still managed to find kills that it didn't bother me that it wasn't gory. So, all in all, I had a good time with this movie. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one, but I still think it's up there and worth most people's time. Fuego, what about you?
Yeah, man, I guess I'm a little less appreciative when it comes down to it with this one. I felt like, you used the word derivative, I felt it was very derivative. I felt like new characters that were implemented were not explored in any sort of interesting fashion. And granted, they are trying to like concoct this whole PG-13 Saw verse, so to speak. And having watched all of the Saw movies in this past year, for anticipation of Spiral, I think maybe that made me a little more critical of this series and how it's defend and declawed and not as nasty. And it's not even so much from a kill standpoint. It's just, I felt like the last film really had some intriguing just set pieces, and there's only a couple in this. I felt like there is, the whole like beach sort of situation, and then we have the, subway situation, but there's really not much else without going into too much specifically.
The bank.
Yeah, the bank too. I know. But as far as where we spent like an extensive amount of time and where the most interesting stuff was, transpiring, I don't know. It just did not feel as spiritedly inspired as the previous one to me. Although there is a character that recurs without spoiling who it is that just made me think, okay, there is cool stuff that you can still do with this because characters might not be gone, so to speak, when you think that they are dead in previous installments, and that is a big hallmark of the Saw franchise. And not to continue to compare in that regard. But yeah, I felt like the budget, the scope, just there was a lot that was lacking in this one for me, at least as far as overall thoughts. I did think the acting was good, though, and we'll get into that, obviously, but I did enjoy the two returning leads from the previous film, and I thought stuff with them was really good. It was just the new additions I didn't really dig so much. So
I can understand that. So that's your overall thoughts. You were a little less impressed with it than I was.
Yeah, I can't
and
say
it's not that I was super
Yeah.
impressed. I just turned my brain off and I had a good time. This is a Fast and the Furious style horror franchise where it's not super deep. You don't need to have a ton of deep characters or anything like that. You're there for the spectacle. And I think they achieved the spectacle for the most part. Like Fuego said, I agree that they didn't go quite as far with the set pieces, but I do think it was enjoyable. So just real briefly, getting into the story, again, it follows our two leads from the last movie that decide to track down this company that are creating these escape rooms in New York City. And when they go, they run afoul of said company. They end up on a subway train with a bunch of other survivors of past games. And they all have to start a new game, a tournament of champions, if you will. And it's all about who survives. Do they survive? Do they get any further in their quest to take down said company? Do they fully succeed? It's really interesting the way it kind of plays out, and I enjoyed it, but again, without spoiling, that's essentially what it is. You got to escape in order to try and accomplish your goals. Did I spoil too much, Fuego?
Yeah, I was about to say, there's really not much else that you can mention, beyond that very brief synopsis. And so,
but how did you like how it plays out,
Once again, I was less into it, man. I genuinely was underwhelmed, I guess, is a way that I could describe it. And I still felt like our two returning leads from the previous film, they were written in an interesting fashion with their plight and their pursuit and everything. But everybody else, these other returning champions, I didn't find their characters particularly interesting. There was one who makes her way through a majority of the film, but aside from that, I don't know. I struggle to find as much interest and innovation. I thought the original one, because I've seen a few of these escape room films, and there was another one from 2017 called Escape Room, and they even kind of did a pseudo remake of it last year, and I didn't find either of those as interesting as the 2018-19 version that this is a sequel to. So derivative, I know, is a term that you utilized as far as certain aspects, as far as setups and writing and whatever. But scope-wise, and there is definitely some world building though that I appreciate, but we don't really get to that until the third act. And so for that reason, and since I can't spoil any of that, that was when the film actually got interesting to me, was in the third act, the reemergence of a specific character.
Sure.
And
I agree.
I don't know, pulling the curtain back a little bit further, so to speak. That was when I was significantly more engaged in comparison. So
That's fair. That's fair.
yeah.
Now, let's talk about the acting. I think everyone acquitted themselves well yet again.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if this is the character you referred to just a little bit ago, but one of the new main characters is played by a female actress named Holland Roden, who was, once again, from Teen Wolf. I keep referring throughout these reviews of stuff, the main cast of the MTV reboot of Teen Wolf has gone on to do stuff. So she's the girl that had all the piercings and that was very knowledgeable and stuff like that. And
She was the one I was referring to. So yeah,
exactly, yeah. So, right. I enjoyed the acting in this. There was a couple of people that you can kind of tell that are a little bit more throwaway than the others, but outside of that, I still thought everyone acquitted themselves just fine. No one pulled me out of the movie.
Yeah, same. I mean, nobody pulled me out of it necessarily, but our lead lady from the previous film, who was on all the posters and everything, she is terrific in this, and I still,
Zoe.
yeah, Zoe. I still felt her sympathy, empathy, all of that stuff. The fact that she has such a rich heart about her, and also the pseudo maybe a romance sort of situation going on with Homie. Their interplay and everything between them was really just significant and cool and everything. But everybody else aside from that one returning character who I cannot divulge, I just was not as into their performances. And I mean, maybe they felt more throwaway because that's the way they were written. They were supposed to be cannon fodder, and what can you do when you're trying to develop a character that is not going to have that much screen time anyway? That's where it's a little bit difficult, I suppose. But our main people, the ones who got the predominance of the screen time and were supposed to carry the film, still just held their weight and impressed me once again. The survivors from the previous film.
Now, as far as production value goes, I still think they did a really good job with this. It's funny because they once again built all these escape rooms in locations that don't make a ton of sense, but there were some things that kind of were explained as they went along and stuff like that. But I still felt it was pretty creative. I mean, again, when you have to make a horror movie surrounding escape rooms, you have to be kind of creative, the same way you have to be creative with Saw, with creating a new trap every time. And while, yes, I agree that there weren't as many set pieces as the first one, I still felt like the ones we got were still enjoyable.
Yeah, moderately for me. I mean, I know you keep referencing the bank aspect and stuff, and
No, it's one that shouldn't be forgotten because,
it just felt much more like sets to me than the previous film. I don't know if that really makes sense to even say it that way, because it was obviously...
I know what you're saying, because I felt that way at first.
Previous film.
I felt that way at first, but then I recalled that even the big snowy cabin exterior ended up feeling
very much
like a set.
Like a set, Which is the way that I felt.
Which is what it needs to be, right? Because they're escape rooms.
Yeah,
they're not intended to be alternate dimensions where you escape a beach and stuff like that. So, while it did bother me at first, like it bothered you, ultimately, I forgave it because I was like, well, they're operating within the continuity that they've set up for themselves.
And I think maybe I was so much more critical about these set pieces in this particular one because of the fact that I wasn't as into the writing as I was in the previous one. And I know they were world building and they were like, okay, you're going after this evil corporation and so on and so forth. But the fact that the previous...
It did feel more contrived than the first one.
Very much so. That's a good way of putting it, man. And that's the way that I felt about this one, unfortunately, because it was all about the reveal in the previous installment and then, this first film and what I'm assuming is going to become a franchise at this particular point.
I would assume so too, and forgive me for interrupting you, but
no,
I think to your point, this felt very rushed, where like the setup happened, we get there, we realize, like, all the victims realized what was going on lightning fast, to the point where Holland Roden herself is the one that's like, oh, so this is like a tournament of champions? And it's like, why the fuck would you put that line of dialogue in there? Like, it's so lame. But they all figure it out really fast. So at the very least, they do the sequel thing where, like, you don't need to take the time to set up the world anymore. The world has been set up. Now it's all about, let's see how this group does now, So I appreciate that they at least did that. Anyway, back to you.
It was very much a film for those who have seen the previous film, and sometimes with sequels, filmmakers are like, okay, we're gonna attempt at least to have something that stands alone and doesn't inherently depend upon those who have seen the previous installment. This one, I mean, I guess since they just catch you up to speed and you're right there and everything is, fine and you can enjoy this film for what it is. But yeah, I guess you don't necessarily need to have seen the previous film to take as much out of this one with how rushed they are with just catching you up on the mythology. I still feel like the previous film is significantly better. That's where I stand.
That's fair. That's fair. Production value, everything's there. I mean, they put the effort in, they put the time, they put the production value in. The set design is really cool for the escape rooms that we do get. The actual camera work and everything is on point. The sound design, is good. You know, all of that stuff. I mean, the film is firing on cylinders, like on a good amount of cylinders. Maybe not all cylinders, but a good amount of cylinders. So
yeah, and that's one thing that I will not disagree about. You know, just because they scaled back maybe the scope a little bit, or just the diversity of all of the different areas, you know, that's not going to say that the ones that they showcased weren't positive and interesting and engaging and everything. We had the same director, Adam, goddamn, I cannot remember your last name, Adam, but he is actually working on the new Insidious film, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, just forging his way in the modern horror community, and it was still, from a visual standpoint, it was dynamic, it was well shot. I just wanted more, I guess. You know, there is all too often, the James Cameron standpoint is something that I all too often call out.
oh, it's
where,
Adam Robitel.
like,
I thought so.
yeah, where you want a sequel to be bigger, brashier, badder, like larger in scope, whereas I felt like this one, despite expanding the mythology a little bit, from that visual standpoint, it was kind of taking a step back. It almost, dare I say, felt like the direct-to-video sequel as opposed to
Really?
the theatrical sequel. Yeah, that's really how I felt. And
I mean, I
you
can't hate on you for it, because I did feel like, the funny thing is, as big as the sets wanted to be, they all did feel very confined compared to the ones from the first one. So I can't disagree with you is the thing. Like, I can't disagree with you. I guess I just had less of a problem with that than you did.
Yeah, I mean,
I was willing to just like let it go and just kind of
Yeah.
enjoy the ride.
check the brain, and as you
Yeah.
said. So, I mean, that's not to say that I like hated this movie or anything, but I don't know. The burden of expectation, as you know, is something that I say all the time, and the fact that I enjoyed the previous film a lot more than I was anticipating to, I think maybe that just left me expecting this to be even better than that one.
Okay.
And so when I found it to be
Burdened
less
yourself
than the
with your own
previous,
expectations.
I know, dude. It happens all the goddamn time. So yeah, it's a
That's
thing,
fair.
unfortunately.
So the last thing we should discuss, which I alluded to earlier, is the gore factor, right? Because this is a definite
Minimal.
This is definitely a PG-13 horror movie, and
Very
it is clear from you know, frame one that that's all it's going to be. It's not going to try and flirt with those lines. It's just going to keep everything squarely in that territory. So there's very, very little blood, very, very little gore to speak of. There's a scene that you would think would have a ton of gore, but no, it doesn't happen. And so, like, the movie manages to sidestep all of that stuff. And yet, even so, I gotta say, it didn't make me hate the movie. A lot of movies that'll make me really hate the movie because, honestly, the gore might have been the only thing to save it.
Yeah, that scene in particular made me kind of chuckle because of the fact that, like, you have a melt factor for certain things, and then you're holding up an umbrella, and the umbrella's not melting.
Umbrellas, awnings. I mean, let's be real. There's
like,
very you know, conditional circumstances going on, and you just kind of have this one. You do, even insofar as an escape room movie lets you go, there's still some added suspension of disbelief that needs to accompany your visit.
For sure. Yeah, and also I thought with a particular scene with a series of lasers that seemed very Resident Evil 1 film inspired. I didn't get the full extent of what I was hoping for with that. I mean, there's like little like singes, so to speak, but yeah, that's where it's still tough with a PG-13 rating because you have to defang and declaw, and you can imply certain things as they do with a couple kills later on. But as a whole, good ideas, and I still will go back to world building and the intrigue in that essence that I want a third film. I genuinely do, and they
I'm pretty sure we'll get one
that there could be more. You know, so.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much covers it. I don't think there's enough that happens in this movie that justifies us to do a whole spoiler section or anything like that. So we'll let you guys go and experience it on your own. Let us know what your thoughts are if you have watched it, or once you do get around to watching it. We'd love to know your thoughts on it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel like you do. Until next time, though, I've been Cecil Laird.
And gracias have been Jaime and Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.
Yeah.